Hey guys, this is a kind of unique piece I've got here. This is a very rare piece of equipment that I've got here. This is from the digital audio tape era, when Sony made a bunch of digital audio tape machines. And this is actually the DIN size car DAT player. I know it's seen better days. I had this in my old car. The car was a 1986 Mustang, and I took the car off the road in about 95. Drove it as a winter car basically for a couple years, but I got rid of the car. Well, I had it in storage for a few years. I got rid of the car, but I didn't want to let this deck go. It had been sitting in the dash for many years. The car was parked outside, and I guess moisture and stuff built up, and what's happened is the drum, the head drum here has frozen. So my little project is going to be, I really would like to see if I can get this thing working as a project. See if we can get it to play back. It's just a straight player, but again, it's such a unique piece that I really would like to see if I can get this thing functional and show you what how the inner workings of one of these car DAT players are. And the nice thing about this open frame design is it really lets you see the guts of a DAT machine. A lot of the other machines, the home machines, the mechanisms are buried, so you really don't get to see what's going on them. And like the portable DAT machine, which I also have one of those, it uses the smaller subcompact head drum, whereas the standard size DAT wraps the tape for 90 degrees on the head drum and uses a larger head drum. This uses a subcompact head drum, and it wraps the tape a full, I think it's 180 degrees on this one here. So this unit is very simplified. Unlike the recorders and even the portable DAT that all use servo motors on them. If you look at these things here, these just use regular DC motors like you'd find in a CD player. There's nothing real special about the little DC motors that are used to spin the head drum and to turn the capstan shaft. And I'm guessing there's probably a belt drive in here as well. Maybe that's what's wrong, is that the belt is gummed up. We'll have to pull it apart and see why it's not working. But anyway, that's what this video is. We're going to take this thing apart and see if we can actually make this playback machine functional again. So I'm just going to first start out by removing the front faceplate. So I've already removed the screws, so there's just a couple of tabs here. We take the front faceplate off. And the front faceplate's actually connected with a ribbon connector, so we kind of have to be careful here. I don't want to damage it. So I don't need to take the front faceplate off completely. I just need to loosen it enough because there are some screws down here that I should be able to loosen or remove, and that should allow me to remove the chassis. So I'm just going to take out these screws and see if I can remove the mechanism, because that's where the problem is going to be. The problem is going to be something on the mechanism is gummed up. Either oil has dried up in a bearing or something, and it's preventing it from spinning. So there's a couple more screws here I'm just going to take out, and then hopefully the mechanism will lift out and unplug, and then I can work on the mechanism as a separate unit. Now there's a plug here. This unplugs the head amplifier from the system, and then the mechanism should just kind of lift out. There may very well be some plugs I have to undo below it, but they're on a ribbon cable and they should just unplug. There's just one ribbon cable that's right down in here. I'll show you with the camera. So here's the ribbon cable. We're just going to release these little catches, and then the ribbon cable should just slide out. So we're just going to use a screwdriver here just to pop the catch open a bit like that. And now the ribbon cable will just lift straight out. So that's got that plug undone, and then there's two more plugs on the bottom here that we just need to unplug, and then we can take the mechanism out and work on it. So here's the mechanism. Now I've never taken one of these apart before, so I'm just kind of studying it first. There was just the one connector here that plugged into the chassis, and the flexible cable, and even the head amp. I unplugged it here, but the head amp really didn't need to be unplugged because it just connected down below onto the main connector, so we can plug that back in. I don't think I'm going to need to remove that, but what I do need to do is I do need to get underneath this chassis here. I need to get underneath the circuit board so I can see why this thing is sticking. So we get our little small precision Walkman screwdriver, as we used to call it, but it was actually for camcorders as well, and just remove the screws that hold the circuit board in place. Now these are special screws that they're using. I don't know if you can see that very well, but they're very small and they have quite a large diameter head, but they're flat. So now that I've got the screws removed, I'm just looking to see how the chassis, and it just flips out just like that. Look at that. Now, as I suspected, this is a belt drive, and I'll zoom the camera in here. Look at this. The motor actually spins the opposite direction, and rather than you would think they would just reverse the polarity on the motor, but nope, they actually reversed the direction by having a crossover belt here. Now this is stiff, this won't turn, so we know the problem's not the motor's fine. The problem is going to be in the drum itself. So I'm just going to lift the belt out of the way for now, and then we can work on this. And I'm thinking maybe if I put a little bit of oil, a little bit of lubricant in this bearing right in here, I may be able to get this thing freed up, because I think probably all that's happened is, as this thing's been sitting over the years, it has gummed up. Okay, after just looking at this a little closer, I've decided that the best course of action will be to remove the drum and work on the head assembly out of the chassis. It'll just give me a little more access to working on some of these small components in here. So this little unit here, this is the actual head drum assembly. And if we look closely at it, I'll get that light out of the way, it's kind of drifting into my workspace here. If we look closely at this thing, you'll actually see the actual little head. And these are similar to a video head on a video machine, but this is much smaller, and this is recording digital signals onto the tape, or in this case it's playing back the digital signals. And what's happened on this unit is this drum has frozen, it's seized up. Now there's no chance that I would ever get a replacement for this, just due to the age of it. The parts are obsolete, so if I have any hope of getting this machine playing again, it'll all revolve around me being able to get this bearing lubricated and get this thing spinning freely. If I can accomplish that, if I can get this bearing to spin freely, then I have a pretty good chance of getting this unit operational again. So I'm going to get my little can of oil, and we're going to try and get some oil down into that bearing. And that's the main reason I took it out of the chassis, was because mounted in the chassis it would be extremely difficult to try and get any oil down where I want it to go. So we're just going to use a good old motor oil, and we'll try and get a little bit of oil down into the bearing. The way I've had best luck doing this before, I don't want to put the spout on here because it's going to put way too much oil in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little piece of wire. In this case, I'm just going to use a piece of small twist tie, I guess is what I've got here. And we'll just use a pair of cutters, and we'll try and take the plastic jacket off of it. And this way I should be able to get a little bit of oil onto this wire. That will probably do just there. I got this little fine wire here. I'm going to try and get a little bit of oil onto this wire and just let it run down, and There we go. As you can see here, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a drop of oil in there. We're going to try and get that to run down this wire and into the bearing. So I'm going to grab my, not only do I have my old man glasses on, but I've also got a magnifying glass here so that I can try and direct this oil right down into the bearing, which I just did. And we'll see whether that will soak in and make this thing free up so that I can get it to spin. Already it's having an effect on the head drum. It's still not as loose as it should be, but I think with a bit of work on this, it will improve. So I'm just going to shut off the camera while I work on this and see if I can get this thing free spinning. So I'm bringing out the big guns now. I'm using some good old TF solvent. You won't find this stuff anymore anywhere, so don't even look for it because this stuff's been banned worldwide. I've had this can. I've got a couple of them. When they banned them because they are harmful to the ozone layer. So when these chemicals were banned as far as selling them goes, I bought several cans of it and really caught hell from the shop that I worked at because these were probably $10 or $15 for a can, and I think I bought about 10 of them at the time. And the owner of the shop, he was not impressed when he got the bill for these things because, I mean, they were the only cleaner that really worked well. And I'm just using this to try and flush the oil in and clean out any other grease, and you can see that this thing's actually starting to rotate a little better now. So we'll just put a little bit more in here, and then I'll put some more oil in once I get everything fully flushed out. And that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm just trying to flush. Whoops, just about dropped that head there. That wouldn't be good. I'm just trying to flush out any dried out grease and anything that's in here. Clean out the bearings, and then we'll put some fresh oil in if we can. And but it's really starting to spin quite freely now compared to what it was when I started, where it barely even moved. So work at this for a while and try relubing it, and hopefully we'll be able to get this unit back in operation. So what I've done here is I've put some solvent into a little container, and I've put the head drum in here, and as you can see, it's already changing color as I agitate it here. This should dissolve any of the dried up lubricant. What's happened is the oil that's in here has literally has almost turned into a tar. It's sticking. The more solvent I spray in, the freer it gets. So I'm going to try just soaking this thing for a while, see if I can get all the old lubricant out, and then maybe get some new lubricant to penetrate the bearing, and hopefully we can save this piece. And we'll give it a try and just see whether it can be turned around by the motor, or at least from the belt side of things. If I can turn the shaft on the motor and the belt turns the drum, then we may be okay. So I'm just going to put the 3 screws back in here to hold the drum in place. Oh, where'd that screw go? I just dropped the screw. There it is. Now, even if I do get the mechanism working on this, there's no guarantee that there's not other faults with it. But that's the challenge of repairs, especially on old equipment, is to see whether you can make things work. And there, the drum is now back in. As you can see, it actually turns quite freely now compared to at least what it was doing before. So now we'll just turn the chassis over and we'll just re-thread the belt. Again, remember that it had the twist on it. So we'll just put the belt around the pulley and around the motor. And it looks like it may still have a bit of a problem because it's still not turning free enough. These belts are not very tight for a reason, because what they're designed to do is the motor, it just wants to freewheel, and they're not regulating the speed on this. It's not a servo motor or anything. What this unit does is, if you look at the capstan motor, this is the capstan motor here, you'll notice that there's, you see the little, I'll show you this here. Zoom the camera and you see the little optical sensor here, and as the motor spins, that creates a strobing effect in this little optical sensor, and as the motor rotates, it breaks the beam or reflects back the beam and then doesn't reflect it back, and it creates a frequency generator signal. There's two more optical sensors on the circuit board here, one here and one here. And what they correspond with is they correspond with the rotation sensors on the take up and supply reel. This is how the unit figures out whereabouts it is on the tape, based on the relationship between the speed from the supply to the take up spool, that and reading the time code that's on the tape. Anyway, we're going to still work at this thing here and see if I can get this motor to turn, or this head drum to turn a little more freely. I'm going to take it out again and just do a little bit more work on it and see if we can get this thing to free up before putting it back together and trying the unit out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this Mr. Dremel tool with the rubber wheel on the end here. I'm going to use this to spin the drum, just by touching it against the drum here. That way I can spin this thing really fast and work the lubricant into it, and hopefully that will free the drum motor up enough that it won't stick anymore. This should spin any debris out of the drum and should get the lubricant that's been sitting on it for the last hour or so, work it into the bearing. We'll see right now whether it's made any difference. Oh yes, it's made a huge difference. The drum actually turns very freely now. Well, as you can see, I've replaced the belt with an elastic band just because the one that I had, the belt, was no good. And as you can see, when I turn this around by hand, that we are turning the drum motor on here, you see? Oops. When I spin this by hand, the drum motor does turn. So we're going to just try this, and you see, it's turning. So we're going to try assembling this unit and just see whether it will spin up. And if it does, then I have to get a belt. This one here is stretched. It's been sitting so long. So that's part of the problem, was the belt itself was loose, but the drum itself was seized up. We've got the drum unseized. We're going to try it with an elastic band and see if it has enough torque to spin up. And if it does, then we'll get a new belt for it. But we're going to put this together and just try it to see what happens. So I've now fastened the circuit board back down, and we're going to mount it back in the chassis and connect it up and see whether we have a DAT deck that will play a tape. But, we're going to connect it back up in the chassis and find a suitable 12-volt power supply and test this thing out next. Now I'm more curious as to whether the deck will actually go through. Okay, it's lighting up, so that's a good sign there that it's Okay, the display is seen better days, but I just want to see whether this thing will actually try to load up the tape. I don't have a DAT tape handy, although I could certainly find one here. I just want to see if I can make the mechanism go through its operation. Well, that's going to have to do it for the video tonight. I can't test it for you tonight as I do have to get the proper belt for it. It does spin, but because the belt itself is not the correct tension, I can't get a lock. When I tried playing it into headphones through a little amplifier, a little headphone amplifier, I started to get some music playing, but because of I just put an elastic band in, which is a little thicker than this thing, so of course every time the thing spins around it twists and causes some error. So we're going to get a belt for this thing and replace the belt, but the repair did work. The drum that was tightly seized up before is now free turning, and everything else appears to work on here, so I'm going to put it back together for now, and when I get the belt maybe we'll make another video of the unit in operation. But now at least we know what the problem was and what the solution is. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you again soon.